My name is Dr. Rick Seguil.
And action. Hey, Jay had a... This is Kirk And action. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick. Eric had a question on fasting versus FMD, or fasting mimicking diet. Intermittent fasting is essentially what everybody knows about as far as fasting versus fasting mimicking diet. So if this is the first time you're finding me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the alert button to find out when I do new videos. So this minute clinic, we have to talk about these two things. And it is summertime at the tail end of spring, so a lot of people are trying to lose weight before getting their bathing suits on and going to the pool or the beach. The FMD, or fasting mimicking diet, I have a link down below, check it out. But it's about the end result is about the same, plus a little more than intermittent fasting, or just the Jason Fung idea about what to do with intermittent fasting. So I'm just going to lump everything into Jason Fung's intermittent fasting and then the FMD. If you are trying to lose weight, sometimes just cutting back on total calorie intake per day would help you, if you stick to it, eventually lose the weight. The body has its way to get to this metabolic set point. If it's been a long time since you have reached this great ideal weight of yours, it might be a little tougher to shake up that metabolic set point. The set point is considered where everybody usually gets back to after they've given up, until you have really done something different to change up your metabolism and embrace a different form of exercise, a different form of nutrition. So bottom line is that if you decrease calorie intake per day, it should help. The problem to that change would be that you are used to a certain amount of calories per day, and just cutting them out will tell your brain, I don't have as much as before. And it'll give you a sense of guilt that, why do I have to fast versus everybody else? So already you're setting yourself up for failure because that always in the long run makes you kick off the habit and get back to old habits. So new habits are always good. Old habits didn't get you anywhere, so try to get rid of them and know what they were before. Sometimes changing around macronutrients, which would be the second point. Total calorie per day cutting back would be the first point. Decreasing or changing around the mixture of macronutrients, that would be proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, would be the second bullet point. This is where a lot of information comes out from the PhDs that embrace ketosis. I think there's a big push for ketosis in the last couple of years. And now there's even carnivore diet. It's a little bit more extreme than ketosis, but there's been more data out of Dr. Stephen Finney's work with athletes and using nutritional ketosis, but more recently the clinic of Sarah Hallerberg, I forgot her name, but she runs the clinic in Indiana, Haller. It's more and more accumulated data saying positive response, and I think it's fair. I think their information is great for athletes especially, but sometimes even to the point of shaking up the metabolism. So, and this is how it works if you don't understand ketosis. So the idea with ketosis is that it gets your body used to a different fuel source. And we're used to ingesting glucose, carbohydrates, and we're used to burning glucose and carbohydrates. Unfortunately, sugar has come into the American limelight as far as nutrition. There's really no nutritional value in that. It's damaging, even fructose is damaging, but it's found everywhere. It accents our tastes, it makes you feel good, gives you a temporary reward, but then it makes you crash later on and gives you about 20 pounds to 50 pounds of extra weight. So when we have a plethora of that kind of fuel, then usually your body won't know what to do with the other kind of fuel. So you either have carbohydrates, and sugars are under that, or fats. And if you're fat adapted, or you have practiced some nutritional ketosis, then your body knows how to use that as fuel. The brain usually knows how to use that as fuel too, but it's just that we're so heavy into this as far as the carbohydrates, as far as our dominant fuel source, and we're exposed to it all day long. So having a body get used to a little bit of ketosis, which is usually starvation, that's that intermittent fasting. So if you have a block of time where the body doesn't have any food, sometimes the trigger is, ooh, we are in a little bit of starvation ketosis. And when that occurs, the body starts to shut down unnecessary tasks and it starts to pull energy from the fat depot in the tummy. So that's called visceral fat, and that's where we put energy that when we have excess amounts, we put energy into that area to save up as a battery for when we're into starvation or famine. But with the average American being overweight, we are not really in starvation, we're just overfeeding. So how do we reverse the most prevalent cause of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease? Well, you decrease your amount of volume, and that would be the calorie reduction. And then you change around perhaps your macronutrients. So maybe if you're doing a little more healthy fat versus unhealthy carbohydrates, that'd be an idea. The paleo diet was popular about 5 to 10 years ago, and it worked for a lot of folks, but I didn't find it sustaining to a lot of patients. When I found out that patients were getting high levels of cholesterol and LDL, inflammatory markers, that it kind of fell from grace. But then the keto phase, or the keto nutrition, erupted. So I think that in a nutshell, that's how fasting would help. When your body tastes nothing for a short amount of time, it senses starvation, and if you push hard enough and long enough, like an 18-hour fast, which is what I do usually, then usually during that time a signal is sent to every cell in the body: we are in starvation. Try to clean up all the riffraff cells and only spend fuel for the most essential body parts or the body functions, brain, heart, and usually hormone is not that important during starvation. Procreation and reproduction to help the species is not important during starvation. What's important during starvation times is just to survive. And the brain might get fooled into a little bit of starvation when you do an 18 hours of nothing but fluid, meaning water, coffee, or tea. So that's the basic understanding of fasting. Now, if you follow Jason Fung's ideas, I think there's some people who do one meal a day, usually dinner time. There's some people who do intermittent fasting, 18 hours on, and then 8 hours off. So there are some people who do 12 hours because that's all they can manifest. There's some people who do 5 days of good eating, 2 days of really reducing or going on a water fast. There's different ways to do it. But bottom line is, if you want to nudge yourself and your metabolism into thinking starvation and burn up that fat depot, this would be one way to do it. So decreased calorie response, messing around with macronutrients. The last would be that idea Walter Longo came up with, which usually gives you the next positive result. So we talked about pulling fat depot away and using that as fuel, so burning up your tummy fat. Not hurting muscle responsiveness at the same time, because we don't want that. If we starve ourselves, then usually that weight loss will be from first the fluid that goes with the carbohydrates you eat, because you're going to cut back, but it also comes from protein deterioration. So you won't notice it, but a lot of people will lose their protein, they'll lose their muscle, because the body will start to get rid of riffraff, and muscle technically is not that important, so it'll start to eat itself muscle-wise. So that's why a lot of people into starvation will have weakness, and they won't be able to tolerate exercise as well as before, and they won't have muscle responsiveness. So this is where fasting mimicking diet's important, because fasting mimicking diet is only 5 days. And it's only 5 days every month. So you do 5 days of fasting and then 25 days of non-fasting, and you hit it again. I think this is a more tangible way, and it's interesting the way Longo found it. I have it in my videos, I watch it. But it's nice because I think it cycles people into being really bad, not bad, but really forcing the message of starvation and then pulling back. But the idea is also do not binge, because on the 6th to the 31st day of the average month, we want you to refuel with good building blocks for muscle, for hormone, for brain, maybe even do the ketosis thing. Again, I refer to intermittent fasting as ketosis. It's not really ketosis, it's just getting to the point of starvation or ketosis. So the benefit, again, would be that with this type of fasting, it's only 5 days a month, which is a little bit easier to tolerate if you're not used to, if you can't get past 10 hours of fasting and 12 hours of fasting, 18 hours of fasting will be a lot to ask. So maybe 5 days would be all you need. And typically, I talked to another patient of mine, when you work way too many hours or you're totally stressed, how many people in an 8-hour shift and more don't eat? You have people who just don't eat and we get by because you got the stress response saying, I got to get through this job. So you know you can do it, but the problem is if you think that, then you think at the end of the day, damn it, I didn't eat, I'm going to eat anything I want because of the guilt and because of the frustration. So that's not a healthy thing, because at the end of the day you will binge because you deserve it. Versus if you know and understand and change the language and say, I'm going to be fasting for 18 hours, I'm going to be refueling for 6, then suddenly the language changes, and it's not like I'm going to open up the cupboard and eat anything I want. No, you know that you're going to be refueling. Refueling means you got to refuel. If you have a Ferrari, you don't put in lawnmower gasoline. So we have to do something healthy for the body. And that's where usually with fasting mimicking, during that 6th to the 31st day, you rebuild till the next time you do a fasting mimicking cycle. And a lot of my patients have noticed not only that they lose weight, like with intermittent fasting, which is something that happens with a lot of folks. Now, I've had a few patients with no arthritis pain. I've had a few patients with 20 pounds off. I've had a few patients that have said that their pain from their back is gone. So there's something, and I will tell you my testimonial is, I did one cycle with whole food. I did not use the Prolon box. Since my one cycle, I have had muscle responsiveness out the roof. So I'm 56 now. I have not had muscle responding like this, like I'm doing now. I only do 15-minute exercises per day, maybe 5 days a week for the summer. I have not had this kind of muscle responsiveness since I was in my 20s. And I'm not joking. I haven't changed. There's no other variables that will account for it. So I would tell you that for me, testosterone responsiveness, maybe testosterone, I have to check levels, is much better than before. I'm going to tell you what happens after this Prolon box I'm doing. So you can do fasting mimicking diet where you just put together your whole food and you count the numbers. Or you can do the Prolon box that comes prepackaged. You just follow the box, each box for every day of 5 days. If I assume right with my limited self-experiment, I'm going to have even better muscle responsiveness in this month of July. So we'll see. If I get big compared to before, then no question, there's something that happens with this type more so than this type as far as immunity and muscle building. And I think that that's where I'd say this might help. For my patients with, say, polycystic ovarian syndrome, where the ovary, that's just it's a woman's disease, where the ovary does not listen to the brain anymore. Brain is supposed to control the way each gland works, thyroid, adrenals, ovary. When the ovary goes rogue, it just produces a lot of eggs and a lot of testosterone and a lot of insulin. So when that happens, you have the side effects: facial hair, acne, early diabetes, weight gain, moodiness. So I think, and I'm doing a limited experiment with a patient of mine, I think that if you can get the ovaries to stop going rogue and start to listen to the signals that are sent out by the brain, then the ovary and the brain will correlate with each other and work together in rhythm. So that's where I think that this type of fasting mimicking diet will probably reset the way the ovary listens. So it's I believe it's almost like a modulator of inflammation. So it doesn't necessarily, targeting nutrition changes doesn't necessarily change the organ, but it does change the way the organ responds to stress and the way it rebuilds. So I have a good feeling about this in my patient. One thing that Walter Longo did find, and I know there's a lot of guys that are getting more and more data, especially the intermittent fasting community, but Walter Longo found that cancer patients fared better than just doing their chemotherapy alone when they combine chemotherapy and fasting mimicking diet. So it does do something at the cellular level as far as improving outcome in bad cells. So if you can get your metabolism to speed up a little bit, if you can get fat out of your tummy, then awesome. If you can prevent muscle breakdown during the time that you're losing weight, awesome. But if you can reverse cancer and you can reset your glands to work like they did back in your 20s, I think the human body's perfect. So it's just, it can repair itself. There's a lot of miracles. I just watched a 100-yard or 100-meter sprint from a 102-year-old man, and I'm thinking, oh, I hope I'm like that in 42 years, or whatever the calculations are. But I think that the human body can repair itself. I think that all the crap that we endure just gets in the way. The food that we eat, the alcohol we drink, the poor sleep that we maintain, the anguish we have at work and in social situations with bullies and or lazy people, and some of the pesticides, the xenophobes, all those other things that are in the community, chemicals. So we have a lot of things that will prevent us from healing if we just push away from that. And some of that will be in decreasing some of the food that we eat, because usually it's laced with fungicides, herbicides, pesticides. If we just push away from that, it might help. If we decrease the total volume instead of eating all day, it might help. Now, it's not for everybody, but at least if you know that you have two options out there, that'll not only help with weight loss, but it might help with disease control. Now, the fasting mimicking diet was with cancer and regenerating stem cells. Intermittent fasting has been shown to decrease the chances for cholesterol to accumulate and diabetes to propagate. So there are some benefits with intermittent fasting and cholesterol and diabetes. But I think there's a lot more with the FMD. I keep on talking about FMD. But again, it's up to you guys. You should give it a try. I do intermittent fasting already. This has been better for my diet than just going vegan. But this, in addition to this, has really pushed the envelope as far as that muscle response, and that's what I'm very impressed with. Again, this is only self-experimentation, but I've had a lot of other patients that are just giving thumbs up. So I have a group of people on Facebook that are now pushing to do the FMD. We'll see how these folks fare. I have a feeling that more and more people will join in, because it's just so easy. Now, if that's too much for you, understood. But the intermittent fasting might be another option. I think it's a lot easier for my folks that have to, say, prepare a bunch of meals for the family, but yet they go to work. So you can usually hold off from eating at work, just maintain hydration, but you eat with the family at home. So you eat during a small window of the day. Might have to cut out breakfast. So just two options. So Eric, I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea. I also have a guy named Anthony, just to give a shout out to Anthony, who does 80-20. 80% of the time will be healthy, 20% of the time will be foods that you usually don't restrict on, or you usually restrict on. Not really that they're bad foods, but I think that's reasonable. But if it isn't getting you anywhere, and you've been doing it for a long time, it might be time to introduce us a little bit of a jump start to your vehicle. And these two options might be a good jump start. So give it a consideration. If you have any comments down below on what works for you, or how you've done the FMD, or how you've done intermittent fasting, please post them. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next Minute Clinic.